It's 10 o'clock. You know what time it is.
Hey.
Hey, and you're back. Hey.
What's going on?
How about it, folks? Good morning. Get out of bed.
Happy
Check the fridge for
Sunday.
breakfast. Serving up soup and meatballs. Pull up a chair. Tim, guess what I had for breakfast this morning?
Was it meatballs?
Well, not meatball. I had one. I literally had a meatball for breakfast this morning. We went to our favorite restaurant, Mario's, last night, and I know I'm never going to eat the whole meal there, so I purposely get enough meatballs that I can have one for breakfast the next day. So as you told me yesterday, you weren't feeling up to it, so
Right.
You know, here we are today, one day late, but it was just kind of ironic that I was able to score a meatball for breakfast today. I'm glad you're feeling better. That's good news.
Yeah, thank you. And I have not had breakfast yet. Would you care to guess what I will be getting as soon as we're done with this?
When we're done with this, I imagine you're going to go get a pastry of some kind. I will say some kind of strudel.
Wow. First, that sounds great. I don't. There is a European bakery right down the street. I wonder if she makes.
I feel like I'm wrong then.
You're wrong. It will be the classic Sunday bagel, Taylor ham, egg and cheese.
I was gonna say bagel, but I thought that might be like too basic, I guess. So go get some strudel.
I know
I'm gonna talk you into it.
She makes really great cinnamon buns because I've had those for breakfast. Like, I've talked myself into like, well, they're basically French toast. They're not basically French
Same
toast.
thing.
Right. Probably like 1,200
my kids are
calories.
gonna have. I think my kids are gonna have day-old donuts. So, because they got their DoorDash yesterday. I don't think they finished the whole box. So, there's that. I mean, so we were just talking before the show. Sunday show a little bit different from Saturday show because so much happened. And so, before we get into our top story of the week, there's obviously a lot going on. You know, the finals are set at the Little League World Series. Florida rallied to get a 10-7 win over Texas. It was a really, really good game. Taiwan knocked off Venezuela 4-1. So it's going to be Florida versus Taiwan today at 3 p.m. Then we're going to get the kids off to school. Speaking of school, in our area, high school football is really big.
Same here.
And major high school football national news, if you're into that, the number 2 rated IMG Academy team got knocked off by Corner Canyon of Utah. Now, Corner Canyon of Utah, they're a 16th ranked national team. It's not some random bunch of schmoes from Utah knocked off IMG.
Right.
This Utah team has I looked it up. They have a really, really good 5-star receiver. He scored 3 touchdowns. They won 35-34. IMG went for 2 late in the game, didn't get it. So high school football in full swing. Did you catch any high school football on Friday?
I caught some yesterday, actually. I was curious to see Southern Columbia against Wyomissing down at
They opened up yesterday?
Yeah, 2 great programs that have state title pedigree, and Southern is basically all new on offense, new quarterback, new backfield. Like, really, they just have I think 4 guys on the line. So I was like, kind of curious after you win 7 straight state titles, what that looks like. And it didn't look like the typical Southern team. They lost. They were down 28-0 at the half. They had a long snap on a punt go about 38 yards past the punter to set up a short field for Wyomissing. They had just all kinds of problems on long snapping and just exchanges. It looked like a team made up of a bunch of new skill kids. Not only
Well,
making
it's
their first varsity start, but against the team that went to the state semifinals last year. They did well to make it close. It was 35-21, and they forced the turnover inside the 10 with like 2.5 minutes left to at least get back in it. So that's encouraging. But great game. Wyomissing looked really good. Their running game looked good. It was just nice to see. There's something different about high school football. Just kind of how raw and unpolished it can be.
my son's in marching band, so we went to the Chambersburg at Gettysburg, and on paper, if you're just looking at the A's, Chambersburg is a 6A school, Gettysburg is a 4A school. Chambersburg should have rolled, but Gettysburg has a 3-year returning starting quarterback, and last year they had a running back run for over 1,200 yards. The down point of Gettysburg, though, they have a smaller offensive line, and Chambersburg's bigger. The one thing that I think really helped Chambersburg was the weather. It was chilly. If it was warmer out, I think the bigger bodies start to tire out more. And in the second half, Gettysburg was able to move the ball, and Chambersburg pulled out a win by 7. The game was tied, and the Chambersburg defense got a big stop on 3rd and 1, and then 4th and 1 at around midfield. And then they got a big 40-yard pass to get down inside the 5, and they punched it in a couple plays later. But I think Gettysburg's going to have a good year. The way they played a bigger school. The thing I like about Friday night football, when I get home from having Derek at the game, I like watching the news and just seeing all that's the best sportscasts I think in our area. Really hammer high school football. It's to me, it's cool to watch.
I
don't know if you ever watched it on the news.
Oh yeah, I still watch the Friday night wrap up shows. Like in my area, it's, as you know, WNEP, WBRE, and they do a great job. And you make a good point about week 1, because as a former reporter, I can tell you that week 1, you plan on your game going at least 20 minutes longer from all the kids like just grabbing their quads because they're cramping up with a Charlie horse, or their calf muscle went because their leg got bent in a funny way.
It didn't happen at Gettysburg, I think, because it was chilly. You didn't have a lot of the heat-related. There were a couple. I think there were 2 or 3. And yeah, you're right. It's I remember now. I hadn't thought about the injury factor early on, and this might be the first time they're actually really hitting, because I don't think you hit much in practice anymore. Like you do a couple drills, but the goal is to try to stay healthy.
Yeah. Now, I mean, you have those first 3 days of the heat acclimation, and you're right.
It's really just running.
Right, and teams really are less likely to go live as much as maybe we did 30 years ago, because you don't want a guy tearing an ACL, breaking a leg, concussion, whatever.
30 years ago.
30 years ago, yeah.
You're not wrong. Yeah, and when I talk to some of the kids I see, and they ask, what was life like back in the 90s? Yeah, we hit every day like it was our job, and
yeah. I think the only time we didn't hit was Thursday night pregame. That was just like a dress rehearsal.
And that was, they called that thud, like where you bumped.
Right. Yeah. Like if a pulling guard's coming down, he's just going to put a hand on you, but he's not going to knock
you. And they still did.
Yeah.
I get it. I understand. Speaking of going thud, one other thing in our pre-show before our top story, they have week 0 in college football. Like, why don't you just call it week 1 and just add another number at the end? But college football week 0, big upset. I don't know if you saw Georgia Tech, Florida State.
Yeah, I was watching that over in they were over in Dublin. I watched a good part of that game, including most of the second half. And I don't, everyone's like, oh, Georgia Tech stunned Florida State. Georgia Tech's a good team.
And Georgia Tech's actually beaten ACC teams, I think, 2 of the last 3 years. Like, big time Miami's not as big time as Florida State was, but Yeah, it's an upset by rankings, but that's the problem with preseason rankings. Nobody knows how good these teams really are. Like Georgia feels like number one, but they could lose 2 games. Who knows?
I mean, hey, 2 words: Appalachian State, right?
And you know what was interesting about that game, that season for Michigan, they went on to defeat a team coached by Urban Meyer that year.
Oh, in the Holiday
They,
Bowl, right?
they beat Florida in the. I thought it was the Citrus Bowl, but they beat
Oh,
Florida in a bowl game.
I think you're right. Actually, the Citrus Bowl.
And our friends who are Penn State fans, Michigan beat Penn State that year too. So the transitive property worked them too.
Your logic is flawless.
I thought so. I mean, that it's way to delude myself into feeling better about that situation. So
All right,
lots
Griffey Guy, what's
of
next?
lots of good stuff going on Saturday. So all that stuff would have been like future stuff on Saturday, but here we are Sunday morning, and as first reported here on Soup and Meatballs last week, the NFL
An
season is going to
exclusive.
kick off officially. Kicks off officially next week when the Ravens and Chiefs kick off Thursday, September 5th. Right now, according to the worldwide leader, tickets, you can get them as low as $223. But, for those of us who aren't flying into Kansas City, watching the games this year might get a little pricey, right? Tim, break it down for us.
Well, I know I was texting you this week about what is it, $700 for Sunday tickets, $699 and change, and it's not even team specific. Like you can't,
No.
like as an Eagles fan, I can't be like, well, I wouldn't because I get the local broadcast, but it's more applicable to you as a Bears fan, where you don't always get those Midwest feeds, on like your local affiliates. But you're
No,
not going to
I
pay
haven't. I haven't seen a Bears game that wasn't like a national broadcast. For a while we had the red zone on cable, but we switched the cable package, and it's gone now, which is fine. But yeah, I don't do. I don't do all the YouTube streaming. As you can see, the Sunday ticket. I don't get into that. But I will also say Sunday is I will watch less football on Sunday than I do on Saturday, just because it's the last day of the weekend. I'm getting ready for the work week. I might pull up the Bears on my phone to see if I get a score. But when you told me about the price reveal, I looked it up. The price is like, holy cow! It's absolutely crazy.
And the product you get, I don't even know if I would pay $100 for it. It essentially seems like like a series of highlights.
Have you seen games on the pay streaming sites? Peacock, Amazon, Netflix?
Yes. Yeah, I do have Peacock and Amazon. I haven't.
Are they any
Is
good?
this, they're as good as any other. They don't, I mean, the Amazon guys. Now I'm trying to remember. Is that where Troy Aikman went? I truly can't remember.
I thought Troy Aikman was on the worldwide leader. I thought he was on the ESPN.
I'm at the age now
Oh.
where like I can't remember people's names. I can't remember what networks they're on. But
I'm with you.
whoever Prime had, they were good enough that like I'm confusing them with the Thursday night and Sunday night crews.
I don't even know who does Thursday night and Sunday night, but like somebody put this online, like how much does it cost to watch every game? Depending on your choices, if you have YouTube TV, NFL Sunday Ticket, plus Peacock, ESPN Plus, Amazon Prime, and Netflix, only for the months when you need them.
And that's
It's
not
around
factoring
$800.
in. That's not factoring in if you want like a cable subscription to have access as a provider access to like NFL Network.
They talk about that. That actually almost doubles it. It bumps it up to about $1,500.
That is wild.
That's a large chunk of change. And earlier this summer, the New York Times, our friends at the Times reported that evidence showed that ESPN put out a suggestion to the league or a proposal that would lower the price to $70 per season, but Fox and CBS rejected it.
And
so
I was complaining to anyone who would listen, and during the playoffs last year, I was complaining to anybody and everybody about the Chiefs and Dolphins being on Peacock, because I was like, this is the canary in the coal mine. They want to see how many people will pay for even just will just even do a trial subscription to watch NFL football, and they're going to make it more and more exclusive behind paywalls. And it's not even 6 months, 8 months later, and we're seeing that.
Yeah.
You know, I wonder, like, the same way that it would have been unthinkable that Monday Night Football wouldn't be on network TV, or that, like, you know, that ESPN would have an exclusive deal that, like, certain broadcast networks in the 90s, that was unthinkable. And I wonder if we're getting to a point where ESPN's going to lose out on deals because of the money that Amazon has, and, you know, Netflix
I think that
and Peacock.
This was ESPN's way of trying to get in on it. Like, it's, I think football is trying to follow. We're gonna talk wrestling a little bit later, but they're almost following the wrestling model. The World Wrestling Federation, Entertainment, whatever, they're moving to Netflix so they can put a more edgy product on, whatever. But what does wrestling do? They give you, when we were growing up, they'd give you like the jobber matches on Wrestling Challenge for free, and then, you know, SummerSlam is coming up, or the Survivor Series is coming up. WrestleMania is kind of a big deal. They would put on pay-per-views. So the NFL, they're going to look at, you know, marquee matchups and say, well, you know, if you want to watch this, you're going to have to pay a little bit extra. And what's even more frustrating to me is the blackout rules, where people in those in markets sometimes can't get the games they want to watch because they're blacked out, because they want you to go to the stadium. Which,
right. The blackout rules feel antiquated. They feel like a relic from a different media era, you know, where you were trying to protect your local affiliates by driving viewers to your affiliates' stations and the advertising that they had, as opposed, you know, if you weren't getting a good balance of at home and live viewers, then the thinking was, then you don't deserve to watch on TV.
I think these games are selling out, though, aren't they?
Yeah, I don't think anyone's crying about NFL attendance. There's no NFL equivalent of the A's.
What boggles my mind, like at Penn State locally, Michigan, Tennessee, these places are putting 100,000 people in seats, whereas like the Pittsburgh Steelers sell out at 49,000. Oh, did they just have like larger seats? Can somebody like me sit there comfortably? Or I haven't been to an NFL game since you and I went in '93.
Have you ever been to like a major college game as a fan, like a
100,000
seat experience?
Bucket list item. You know, one of these years I'll get to Ann Arbor. The closest I've come is just I've been to an IUP game. I've been to a Shippensburg game here locally, but yeah, nothing D1, nothing with, you know, thousands of people.
I was at a Penn State game a couple years ago, where it was in prime time. It was a whiteout game, and
that must have been nuts.
It was crazy. I mean, just even walking up to the stadium, me and my friend were walking up, and let's just say it was more than one person I saw publicly urinating.
Average Saturday night in Happy Valley.
Sure. It took easily an hour to even get into the stadium because of bag checks and all that. Like, just the logistical nightmare of doing security check on 111,000 people. And then the whole time I was in there, I was like, the bleachers are going to collapse. The bleachers are going to collapse. Did it just shake? Should we get out of here? Where's the exit? But no, it was a great game. It actually wasn't. Penn State blew out Iowa.
Penn State. Oh, I remember that. I think Michigan went to Penn State that year, and I started asking some of my Penn State fan friends, why are you whiteouting Iowa, and you're not whiteouting Michigan? That was
I can't remember if this was the year that Penn State beat Ohio State. or if it's the year after they beat Ohio State, like the Marcus Allen team, blocked field goal return against
The
Ohio.
field goal, yeah.
But it was around
I
that
think
era.
the blocked field goal game was a night game, so that had to white out Ohio State that year.
It was like 16 or 17, 2016 or 17, something like that. But it's wild. You have to experience it at least once.
I get there. I get there eventually. It's Ann Arbor's not that much further than where I normally go. I might have to take Monday off of work, but someday.
That should be a trip we do for one of our 50th birthdays.
Oh, that's coming up.
Hey, I have a September birthday.
Hey, how about
what are the odds?
Amazing. We'll start planning 4 years down the line here. So. Right. But and hopefully, and maybe by then, NFL streaming, they'll have figured something out where the average person can watch Caleb Williams, because in 4 years, the Bears will probably be worth watching. We'll see, and who knows how the network deals will work and how that translates through. All I know is that the networks will have little problem finding a market for the NFL. The market now, segue time, markets for the WNBA are actually changing because of, I didn't know this was a player. Have you ever heard of Caitlin Clark?
Yeah, obscure little point guard from the cornfields of Iowa, I believe.
The Indiana Fever. She's a rookie this year, apparently. We know who Caitlin Clark is. She broke the single season rookie record for assists. She had 232 going into Friday's game, averaging 17.8 points, 8.3 assists. One of the major contenders, I think there's really only two, for Rookie of the Year. Angel Reese being the other, who just put together a 20 rebound game. I think she on Friday night she had a 20 rebound day. She has 20 doubles on the year.
She went like 12 and 19 on Friday.
So I mean, between Clark and Reese have an interesting rivalry dating back to their college days. The Final Four game. But these two are making the WNBA at least worth checking out to a point. Record-wise, the Fever and Chicago, not exactly where you want your marquee stars, but they got drafted early, and those teams are generally not so good. So, what have you seen with Caitlin this year?
It's funny because I think everyone thinks of her, at Iowa shooting the logo threes. And I think people expected we'd be getting Steph Curry, and instead we got Magic Johnson. The way that it was frustrating, because I watch a decent amount of WNBA. It was frustrating the first 10 or 15 games of the Fever season, just kind of seeing her finding teammates, especially on those look ahead outlet kind of transition passes, and teammates just not catching it or not expecting it. It just seems
Did they have much of a preseason?
Not really. I mean, Final Four is in April, and already they're getting drafted 3 or 4 weeks later. They have to declare by the Tuesday after the championship.
So, I mean, reverting back to football a little bit, when you talk about the best quarterback wide receiver combos, they say you have a lot of chemistry. That's developed over time, where I can look at you, you can look at me, we know where we're going, and in the middle of a play, if you decide to change, I can see that and feel it. I think early in the year, a lot of the struggles might have been they didn't have chemistry, where she was going to zig, they were going to zag, and like you said, if she's throwing a pass they weren't ready for, that kind of stuff I think has to build up through time, right?
Yeah, and I think the other problem, I think it's amazing that they started as well as they did this rookie class, considering how shot their legs must have been after, Reese makes a deep tournament run. Obviously, Clark went to the final. And, then you're turning around and starting your professional career a month later. I think,
and this is professional basketball. The difference between what the kind of experience you would have in college versus professional, it's a large step.
Yeah, the
It,
speed
it
alone.
really is at any level.
Yeah.
Women's basketball, men's basketball, football, whatever.
When you think about, Clark having to adjust to the speed of the perimeter game as a guard, and Reese having to adjust to the physicality inside, as a big, it really is amazing they've both adapted as well as they have. I think the Olympic break was a godsend for both of them to just take that time to, get some light work in, rest, not be, run ragged trying to win gold against France.
Were you surprised Clark didn't make the team?
No, because she didn't go through the USOC process. She didn't seem like she really saw it as a realistic, goal for her for this year. It didn't seem. I thought she would have been a borderline pick, but I didn't throw up any kind of fuss when she wasn't named. I was like, well, the 12 they named are the 12 best players in the league right now. They might not be next
And they
year.
won gold, so
Exactly. Even if they
hard
lost
to argue that.
Even if they had lost to France, I still think I understand the logic behind not. I think it makes more sense that Clark didn't make the women's team than Jaylen Brown not making the men's team. That still kind of boggles my mind, even though the men won gold.
Same kind of concept. Well, between winning gold and winning the Rookie of the Year, if you're a betting person, if you're a betting man, I think Clark is easily the bet, only because if you look at the odds-on favorites to win the MVP in the WNBA, Asia Wilson of the Aces is the odds-on favorite at minus 3,000. Like minus 3,000, she's the favorite. But she's averaging 27 points a game, 11 rebounds a game. The Aces they're not the Liberty, but they're in the playoff race. They're 17-11 right now, ranked fifth. But Asia Wilson is just lights statistically heads and shoulders above anybody. The next best bet to win the MVP is a tie between Sabrina Ionescu of the New York Liberty and Caitlin Clark. They're both plus 8,000. So Asia Wilson minus 3,000. That means you bet $10, you win $10.33.
Right.
Whereas Caitlin Clark, you bet $10, you win $800. She's number 2. And Angel Reese nowhere to be found in the top 5.
One quick point about WNBA stats that, people might not, they see Asia Wilson's averaging 27 and whatever, 12. And they're like, yeah, okay, that's good. But that's in 40-minute games. You can't think of that in terms of NBA stats. So they play 48 minutes in the NBA. Obviously, you know that. So yeah. What Asia Wilson's doing on an NBA scale is averaging like 35 and 15. Like she's like Wilt Chamberlain, essentially. If you think about what Caitlin Clark's doing, she's averaging like really good. She's averaging like 24 and like 14 assists. She's like Isaiah Thomas, essentially, as a rookie.
Ionescu's 20 and 6 assists. The big thing with Ionescu is she plays for New York, and they're 25 and 4. Yeah. They're the best team in the league. So,
but you could make the argument Ionescu is not even the best player on her team because she plays with Brianna Stewart.
Brianna Stewart's fifth, so she is plus 9,000 to win the MVP. You can bet $10 and win 910. So I'm not sure. I think if I'm just looking at numbers and right now, that's all I'm doing. Ionescu's at 19.9 points, 6 assists. Brianna Stewart's at 19.8 points, but 8.8 rebounds. So I don't know. They're a pick 'em for me. I don't know how you put one above the other. One has the ball in her hands more often, I guess.
I think ultimately, in terms of MVP, though, it's a moot point. I bet on Asia Wilson and take my 33 cents.
You know what? I think you're safe to bet your 60 and walk out with $1.
Yeah.
At this point, I guess.
What does $1 buy me now? Does it buy me bubble gum?
No.
Like a pack of grape Hubba Bubba?
You know what? I haven't had Hubba Bubba in a while.
I'm not 12 years old anymore.
You're old, and oh man, one of the stores here in town carries Big League Chew.
I love Big League Chew.
That was good stuff. The flavor lasted longer than it did for like the juicy stripe stuff,
But the
but
glory
it
lasted
was
forever.
yeah, that was good stuff. So we should draft gum later on down the line.
All right.
Not today, but um,
Or
we
discontinued candies, because candy cigarettes are going to be on that list.
yeah. Oh, bonkers are number one.
I'd totally forgotten about bonkers until this very minute.
Until just now. That's good.
Bonkers.
Well, what else? Let's talk more bonker stuff. Odds-on favorite to win the MVP in the WNBA, Asia Wilson. Odds-on favorite to win the MVP in the American League. I'm not sure there's any doubt. As Major League Baseball pushes towards September, unfortunately, the pennant races don't appear to be the most exciting things in the world right now. Only a couple are really tight. The American League East, the Yankees and Orioles are exchanging half-game leads every so often. The American League Central, the Guardians have a 2-game lead over Kansas City, Minnesota. Every other division is really not locked up, but it's not as exciting as, and even the wild card race. I just checked this morning. The Red Sox are 4.5 games out of the playoffs. The Mets, yes, somehow the Mets are 2.5 games out, and that's the closest race we have right now. The thing that might help the Mets is the Braves are right ahead of them in the playoffs. The Red Sox are looking up at the Twins and Royals, and the Orioles too. But I playing interdivision games in September, the Mets might play the Braves more often than the Red Sox play the Central teams.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can agree the AL East is just, I mean, it's so stacked this year, between Baltimore, New York. Everyone's above 500 except Toronto, and last I saw, they were like right there.
That last year was the same way.
Yeah,
I almost think they almost finished all over 500. It's been a really good division for a long time, and New York needs to get bullpen help. If they have a 1 or 2 run lead in the ninth inning, I don't think there's a lot of faith in Clay Holmes. They have to find some help on the infield. When people on the radio were talking about potentially Anthony Rizzo being the answer, coming back from an injury, hitting 213. I mean, there's a reason why, the Yankees went out and got Chaz Chisholm to play third. Once the playoffs start and pitching starts to, take over, I don't think you see this. The Yankees had home run problems in playoffs past. It can't be home run or bust anymore. But Juan Soto spreads the ball around. Aaron Judge is hitting 340 now, which is nice. They need some complementary stuff down the lineup.
Yeah, and I mean, I know I was watching Boston. They had Arizona at home yesterday. Boston's in a little bit of a slump, and they're just not scoring runs. I mean, they're getting no hit through 5 yesterday. They didn't score a run until someone banged one off the monster in the 9th that took a friendly roll into center field. But
And what hasn't helped them is Kansas City's been kind of hot lately. I don't know how. I don't know anything about Kansas City other than their record and what you see on the stat sheet. But
let me ask you this: as a Yankees fan, who do you think is winning the American League this year?
like the entire American League?
Yeah, who's going to go to the World Series out of the AL?
Well, it's hard for me to just looking at the division leaders. It's hard for me to say Cleveland, just because it's Cleveland, and I think that they're not ready. That puts it between New York and Houston. If Houston is healthy, they will give New York problems. I still like to think that the pitching for New York with Garrett Cole. If Marcus Stroman is healthy, I like Marcus Stroman in the playoffs. If New York can find some kind of success out of their number 3, if it's Rodon, there's I don't think there's a slam dunk. I wouldn't count out Baltimore. Baltimore just had one of their pitchers got injured though. I don't know who off the top of my head. So it's hard for me to pick Baltimore just for that reason when you get that kind of injury. But when I look at New York's bullpen, I don't say this with any kind of confidence whatsoever. I will say it's a coin toss between New York and Houston. And right now, New York has the home field advantage, I think, because they have a better record. So I will say New York in 7 over Houston.
Okay. Do you have a team in the National League that you think? I know all year it's been sort of Phillies.
I'm going to go with Philly. I'm going to go with Philly as well. That is slightly over Los Angeles, and that's a gut pick right there.
It's funny to say this about a division-leading team, but the Dodgers don't strike me as great, like playoff contenders. Like they're constructed.
I can see that.
Just what they have in terms of starters, what they have in the bullpen. I just don't know if they're constructed for a run. I mean, they can obviously hit the ball. Their lineup is fantastic.
If you look at just what happened last year with teams like Atlanta and Baltimore, both winning 100 games and getting knocked out in the first round. I mean, the one nice thing about baseball playoffs is you wipe the regular season clean. What you did there almost doesn't matter. And getting that bye sometimes hurts you because you miss some time. You get out of the routine, and a team knocks you. A San Diego comes in and knocks you off.
It takes me back to 2007 when the Rockies just kind of stormed through the National League, and the Sox had to come back from 3-1 against Cleveland. They really had to fight and scrap. And I think Colorado had something like 12 or 13 days off between their clinching the LCS and going to the World Series.
That's an insane amount of time.
Right. And then, the Sox, they were right in that routine, and then they went to the World Series and swept. So I think there is a point about just like, I know players, want to go and sleep in their own bed and whatever, but I think there is merit in the postseason is an extension of the season, and it should feel like the season.
So by that account, I think we can all, look forward to a San Diego, Kansas City World Series with
a ratings bonanza, by the way.
It will be a ratings bonanza. I think Major League Baseball is once again advocating for a New York, Los Angeles World Series. However, the baseball gods will deign it necessary to give us Milwaukee, Cleveland.
I mean, we did just have Texas, Arizona, not exactly two metropolises. So.
Not. And Arizona was a dark horse from the start.
Well,
for them to make it was.
You talk about how the playoffs are quirky. I mean, the Phillies were coming off having been to a World Series to go to the LCS. They come out hot against Arizona, and then the Diamondbacks end up beating them in 7. I think everyone just kind of, especially here in Pennsylvania, took it as a given that the Phillies were going to run through Arizona, and that was very much not the case.
I'm just looking this. I wouldn't know offhand. Arizona last year was 84-78. They finished 16 games out of first place.
Wasn't it the fewest wins by a World Series finalist or a World Series qualifier?
And Texas tied. They tied Houston 90-72. But in terms of the entire American League, they had the 3rd best record. So. That's the interesting part about baseball as we get into the pennant race. Things can change in 2 weeks. Things will will plan themselves out as we hit into October. But I'm pretty sure that I feel good about Aaron Judge's MVP. He's clean off the shelf. That's
He's the
coming.
Asia Wilson of the American League.
You know what? I don't know what the odds are. You know what? Let's check this out. Aaron Judge odds to win MVP. They're slightly better than no. Oh my goodness, no. Asia Wilson. Now this has to be old. Minus 1,500. That's it
For Asia Wilson?
No, for Aaron Judge.
Oh my!
When I looked up Asia Wilson, she was minus 3,000.
Minus 3,000.
So Aaron Judge is minus 1,500. You can bet $10 and get 60 cents on that.
Well, now I'll be able to afford that gum.
That you might be able to get your strudel later today too.
This is a big Sunday. We should always record on Sundays.
Big day coming.
Big day here on gum and strudel.
Yeah. So I mean, we have now that we talked about some serious stuff, we've got some goofiness on tap for you. Between our top 5 and our draft, we're going to kind of go back to back. Last week here on Soup and Meatballs, I talked a little bit about my experiences with the late great Off of the Wild Samoan, and this week we're going to do some wild and wacky drafting. You suggested we draft professional wrestlers, or I think you suggested we draft WWE wrestlers or WWF wrestlers, however you want to put it. And I said we should probably expand it to professional wrestling just to be safe.
Right.
So we're gonna look at that and then we're gonna do our top 5 managers, because I think the managers might overlap a little bit. Superstars we have a lot of leeway here. So here we go. Let's I have no idea which one of these I'm gonna pick. We're gonna go with this one. So you get to call red or black.
You know, red worked for me last week, so I'm going to switch it up. I'm going to go black.
There it is. So I hold on here for a second. I'm going to mark this down. Tim with the first pick, Max with the second pick. I'm just going to write your first pick in.
Okay.
So there it is. You're already locked in. Who would you pick number 1?
I think we both know it's got to be Mr. Richard Flair.
I set myself up here. So here's the draft slide. But a number of years ago, is this 2016 or 2015? I called you to see if you wanted to come down to. It was in Harrisburg.
Yeah.
Ric Flair did a meet and greet, and it was dumb luck that I got in to meet him, because they overbooked it. Like if they had time for 100 meet and greets, they sold 200. Now the way the line was, I kind of finagled my way into the VIP portion, and I just got in near the end, and I got to see him for like 30 seconds, enough to, and I wore the Michigan stuff because I know he's a Michigan fan.
Right.
So we actually talked Michigan football that day. It was Penn State, Ohio State. It was a Saturday show at the arena, and he was interested in getting back to his hotel to watch the Ohio State team lose. And I don't know if they did that day, but yeah, we talked a little bit about Michigan football, and he looked at me. He's like, "That's a great shirt, man."
Now he probably appreciated, like every other, jabroni who came up to him, talked about being the jet flying, limousine riding son of a gun. I think he appreciated someone who appealed to his Michigan fandom.
He was also slightly inebriated, a little bit.
Wow.
I got a call from the promoter 2 weeks after the event apologizing to me that I didn't get to meet him, and I said I don't know if he was going to send me something or like a Ric Flair poster or something, but I blurted out the truth by accident. I'm like, no, I did get a chance to meet him, and he's like, oh, well, great, and you're not getting a poster then. So shows what I know about honesty,
grifting posters for professional wrestlers.
And actually on my list here, because I put a list together, I have two lists. One if I get the first pick, and one if you get the first pick. If you got the first pick, I had Flair down at 6 because I figured there's no chance he's even making my top 5 because he's going 1 to you.
Right.
So with my number 1, then I'm going to take someone who certainly doesn't rival the lifestyle, but could certainly rival Flair on the mic. Probably my all-time favorite, even above Flair a little bit, Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Great choice.
I think Flair Stone Cold is the obvious one too. They're the after this things get kind of wild now. I'm interested to see where you go.
And it's interesting because we both, grew up in the same era, but I feel like you've been more in tune with professional wrestling in the 2000s and 2010s. So mine are going to be very 80s and 90s.
I don't know. I mean, there's somebody watching on YouTube right now that's going to be yelling out Lou Thez. Spoiler alert: Lou Thez didn't make my top 10.
Somebody picked the gobbledygooker.
That's terrible. There's nothing good about that. Lou Thez, at least. That's a name. Oh God, the gobbledygooker was worst gimmick ever. Worse than the Shockmaster.
Well, I think you also have a reasonable guess at who my number 2 is.
I don't know. It's between two. I think I know if I had to guess, but I'll let you know if you get what I think.
I'll tell you who it is. He's the cream of the crop. It's the Macho King, Randy Savage.
Oh, you're going Macho King.
Well, I'll go all incarnations. I'll go Macho Man. I'll go WWE era or WWF, I guess, era Macho Man.
Randy Savage was not only my number 2. I had considered him number 1 only because of his days with the St. Louis Cardinals. And sure. If you Google Randy Poffo Cardinals, you see his baseball card. It's so incredible because it's Randy Savage playing baseball.
Just a great head of hair. Like he's got like a 70s page boy haircut.
That was the one thing about Savage that between like when the Mega Powers were formed, they had the worst hair I think of any like big time stars. Ric Flair's hair, even when he got older, and I watched the 30 for 30 yesterday, just to prepare for this.
Yeah.
Even his hair now, so much functionally better than Savage's. Savage's feels like it's. I don't. It looks like a wig almost. And then when he's in there working and he sweats, he looked better sweaty, but still it wasn't.
But both of the Mega Powers, both Savage and Hogan, their hair would just thin gradually throughout a match until they were almost completely bald. Like the few strands they had were caked to their scalps with sweat. And like their hair was like the consistency of like that fine like corn silk that you find inside like a corn husk. And they would just shed it like a golden retriever.
You're not wrong. And these guys, some of the matches they worked were like Flair worked 60-minute matches when they were doing when he was with the NWA working every day. He would put a 60-minute match together. I mean, the WWF house shows, I mean, Savage is out there working 15, 20 minutes. And like the TV tapings, the pay-per-views, he would do like a 20-minute match. I can't imagine if he went, marathon, how just it would fall out. I mean, he would go stone cold.
The best example of that is his WrestleMania 3 match, the legendary match with Ricky Steamboat. Because that was, I don't know how long that match was, but Savage was basically bald by the end.
Do you know what the really nutty part about that matchup was? 100% scripted. Nothing was called in the ring. 100%. Like Ricky Steamboat, they had a notebook of how things were going to go, and Savage. This was on Savage though. This is how he did his stuff. Steamboat said he was maniacal about planning every single aspect of the match on like in a notebook. So like Steamboat had to memorize because nothing was going to get called on the fly. And I don't know if that helped, the word kayfabe when, the kids thought everything was, legit and on the up and up. It couldn't hurt though, because if everything you do is going to be memorized, there's no need to communicate in the ring.
Do you have a moment where you realized, like, definitively, okay, wrestling's fake? Like maybe it's like Santa Claus, like you had sneaking suspicions, but there was like a thing that happened that you're like, oh, okay, I see dads filling the stockings. Santa's not real.
So the first thing I'm going to tell you, number one, I called in the Colin Cowherd show, and I had this argument with him. Wrestling is in fact not fake. Well, wrestling is scripted, choreographed entertainment. So because I covered enough guys at the Off of the Wall at Samoan School. When I went down there, a guy was in a neck brace. Like, if I pick you up over my head somehow and drop you
right
on a table, like, that hurts. Now, I'm not really punching you when I found WrestleMania 5, because it was after WrestleMania 5 when the Mega Powers exploded. I was out in Pittsburgh, and I remember just asking, I said, I wonder who won. He said, it probably doesn't matter. They're probably both out having a beer together right now anyway. And I'm like, yeah, you might be right.
I think mine was
around then.
I think mine was when the Mega Powers exploded on Saturday Night Main Event. Do you remember that?
The actual, like, when Akeem throws
like Savage like
out
going
and
back
cracks
to the
Elizabeth
dressing
in the
room
head.
to like beat up Hogan. Yeah. And there's a moment where where Brutus Beefcake accidentally walks onto camera early. He looks in the camera and he's like, "Oops, almost." And as a kid, it looked like a blooper from a TV show. It looked like a blooper from Dick Clark and Ed McMahon. And I was like, okay. I question the veracity of this enterprise.
That's the danger of doing stuff live. And I'll tell you what, get back into my draft, because I'm going to go with somebody. My number 2 pick, we're only on the 4th pick in the draft here. My number 2 pick had some of the best off-camera stuff, I think. And my list is, I'm looking at my list now as me now, not back then. Because back then I certainly would not take this guy number 2, but I have grown to appreciate his work and his hair, believe it or not. I'm going to go with Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man.
He was on my list. Gotta love the $1 Million Man.
I have developed.
I was going to say, I don't think I've seen a funnier bit than when he bet the kid if he could bounce the basketball, and then he kicked it away.
That was classic heel stuff. I've developed, or at least I've tried to develop it in my work, the $1 Million Man laugh. Like, if somebody does something and, like, I think it's ridiculous, I will. That's tremendous stuff right there. As an adult,
I want to make that like my ringtone for when you call. Is either that or the $1 Million Man's money, money, money entrance theme.
I'll record it. I'll send you an MP3. You can finagle it together.
All right. So who do I have now? I took Flair.
You have Flair and Randy Savage.
So my third one is also a guy who really known for his mic skills, but just a great wrestling lifer. I'm going to go with the Hot Rod. I'm going with Roddy Piper.
I have you marked. I had your 3 picks. Like, now 4's. I don't know where you're going 4. But I knew you were going Roddy Piper 3. Somehow he didn't make my list. I don't feel bad missing out on him. I totally agree with you on absolutely everything Piper did, mic wise, work wise. My number 3, I actually remember seeing clips of primetime wrestling of Roddy Piper feuding with this guy. And again, I'm looking at it from an old guy's perspective. One of the coolest heel wrestlers ever. Needed a world title run in WWE. Got one in WCW. I'm going to go with Ravishing Rick Rude.
Oh, he was my next pick. Oh,
see? I didn't know you were going to go there. I'm glad I stole him while I could.
Yeah, DiBiase and Rick Rude we're going to finish out my 5.
Now you got to go into the bank a little bit.
I've got to adapt.
The $1 Million Man's bank.
I'm going to go with someone who was a collaborator with the $1 Million Man. He was a tag team partner with the $1 Million Man. And he was the 8th wonder of the world. It's Andre the Giant.
Andre is a tremendous pick. I thought you were going to go Erwin R. Shyster for a second.
He's an honorable mention. He's an others receiving votes.
Can't pick Mike Rotundo 4th. Andre's tremendous. The Andre stories, if you get on YouTube and hear just some of that stuff, beyond the beer and partying, the sheer strength of the man.
Do you know the story about when he was like a teenager in France and he lived like in a rural part of France and his neighbor was Samuel Beckett, the playwright who did Waiting for Godot.
Okay.
And Andre the Giant was too big for like the local school bus. And so he would ride to school. Samuel Beckett would give Andre the Giant, then Andre Roussimoff rides to school, and Andre would sit in the bed of Samuel Beckett's truck to get to school when he was a little boy in France.
That's nice. Good for Samuel Beckett. And
then he went on to create the Quantum Leap program. So.
I was gonna say I hope he finds his way home, even though one of the saddest series finales he doesn't. Oh.
They misspell his name, by the way. They say Sam Beckett, and they misspell Beckett because they didn't know that would be the series finale, and NBC was like, just tack something on to the end to give a conclusive finish to the story.
Oh gosh, that's sad. But good story about Andre. I like that.
Thank you.
We number 4 for me is you talk about Mount Rushmores of things, like Mount Rushmores of Yankees is hard. Mount Rushmores of professional wrestling, I think, is even harder. Because I think this guy, work-wise, maybe not on it, but gimmick and character-wise, he's probably number 1. He lasted over 30 years, undefeated at WrestleMania for the longest time, for whatever that matters in a choreographed sport. I'm going with Mark Calloway's work as The Undertaker, number 4.
Another great choice. I feel like a lot of The Undertaker's like most notable work came after I stopped watching wrestling. Like, I think of The Undertaker mostly for how he was introduced and like awesome. Beating Hogan and Tuesday Night in Texas and that kind of era of Undertaker. The other stuff after he started doing his run in like the 2000s where he kept coming back as like different versions of The Undertaker is a little outside.
I didn't like the biker version. I like the supernatural stuff. Like, to me, that was entertainment. When he came back as like the American Badass, that wasn't. And that's where his work probably took over more. Like, for a big man to do the kind of stuff that he did, was impressive. I like the gimmick of putting the Ultimate Warrior in the coffin and the whole. The vignette stuff with him and Paul Bearer really made his character even better, shine even more. The brother angle with it's gotta be Kane. It was a good time to watch the entertainment value of the work that he put in, and he did it for so long. I remember watching him. We'd come home from school and wrestling was on ESPN. Like the USWA, and Mark Callis and Danny Spivey were the Twin Towers. So I had seen the guy work before, and I didn't put 2 and 2 together because when he was Mean Mark, he had short hair, it was buzzed, and when my number 2 pick introduced him at the 1990 Survivor Series, he came out with like the long red hair. For the longest time, I thought your brother Matt looked like the Undertaker because he had long that colored hair. I'm like, dude, your brother's going to tombstone us. It's not going to be cool at all.
And that's what I was going to say. The tombstone also, shout out, because that might be a top 5 finisher.
Yeah, oh, you know what? It's definitely a top 5 finisher where you need to trust your opponent.
Yeah. Well, you know about
Some
the
of them, like
controversy with Hulk Hogan.
yeah, the Undertaker was put aback by that for the longest time, and I don't know if they had film replay. His head came nowhere near that chair.
Yeah.
But I mean, Hogan was also a 320 pound dude. For Calloway to hold him that tight up against his chest for the drop, Hogan might have felt a jar just because he's so big, but his head certainly didn't hit the ground.
We can agree on that.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm down to my last pick.
Yeah, this is going to be tough.
I'm between.
I have no idea where you're going here.
I'm between two guys who have very similar profiles. They started as part of a tag team before finding individual success. I'm going to go with Bret the Hitman Hart over Shawn Michaels was the other guy.
Wow, you would have gone Michaels. Mike, he didn't make my short list.
Yeah, I go Bret Hart. Just I love the mic skills. He's the excellence of execution in the ring. Sharpshooter's just cool as hell as a finishing move. So yeah, Bret Hart's gonna be my number 5.
What Bret Hart accomplished, it was very, very hard back in the 90s. Bret Hart was, let's use actual terms here. He was a baby face, which means he was a good guy in Canada and in Europe. But in the United States, he was a heel. And this was at the same time. Like, he would go to Montreal on Monday and be cheered. And then he would go to Detroit on Friday and get booed. And he worked that angle so well on the mic. And his wrestling skill in the ring, technique wise, one of the biggest reasons why he never got a big run with Hogan was because I think Hogan was afraid he would outwork him. And that's not saying Hogan could absolutely work. If you see his video stuff from Japan, the guy had skills, but when he was working for Vince, he didn't have to do enziguris and he didn't have to. He just showed up, did the thing, punch, leg drop, and he was done. He gets paid. Bret Hart was he was like a medium-sized guy, and he worked like overtime. So I mean, as far as workers go, he might be, aside from Ric Flair, he might be the best guy on your list because he and Flair could put on. Oh, forget about it. But
I'm
the
curious,
heel babyface thing, nuts.
I'm curious, real quick. Speaking of heel babyface, would you rather be a heel or a babyface if you were a professional wrestler?
Right now, heel easily, only because the heel does more of the offense and doesn't have to take nearly as many bumps. There's a part of it though where like so my fifth pick is not going to be this guy, but he might be one of my favorite humans on the planet. John Cena, for his work with Make-A-Wish. Just for his work with Make-A-Wish, he is just oh my gosh. And this is the dad in me now talking. Like 16-year-old Max, forget about it. Oh, John Cena stinks. But like there was a wrestler back in the day, monster heel because of his size, John Tenta, the Earthquake. He really hated being a heel because he loved kids and he wanted to sign autographs and he wanted to be like a role model, but he just couldn't, So there's that aspect. I think I would have liked about being a baby face, like signing autographs and smiling, but there's nothing quite like riling people up to the point where they want to see you get your bell rung. And in a match, if we're working and you're the baby face and I'm the heel, I'm going to do about 80% of the offense. And if you win, okay, that's fine. I'm not going to bump as much, if that makes sense.
And if we talk about professional wrestling in comparison to like other forms of pop culture, I have a soft spot for like the funny bad guy. Like Daffy Duck was always my favorite cartoon growing up because he was always greedy and he's always trying to get his, and like if you look at my list, like Ric Flair and Randy Savage, like Wanting to have like DiBiase kicking a basketball away from a little kid, or Rick Rude seducing some guy's wife.
That's,
Like
I
that's
mean,
funny stuff. I would love to be that kind of heel, like
so
just like
I'm
ridiculous over the top antics.
absolutely with you. Now, I'm going to give you a list. Once I give you my number 5, I'm going to give you a list of people who I would have picked if it was like I was 12 years old again, and like as my favorite wrestlers evolved, and you're going to see a big difference there. So I'm down to I created a list of 10, and I am going to go with I'm going to skip over one of them. I'm going to skip over my 7 because I think my number 8 was better. Solely because size wise, I think he rivals me. I'm close. He not the biggest, strongest guy in the world, but he may have been the most creative, psychological, on the mic guy in the history of the business. I'm going to go with Jake the Snake Roberts.
He got strong consideration for me because he was another guy who could do either. He was a great heel.
He was a much better heel.
He was a much better heel, but
I think the Snake made him a babyface because people are like, look at that, it's so cool. But oh no, when he turned on the Warrior, that 3-segment thing, go back to YouTube and watch this. Watch Jake Roberts Ultimate Warrior vignettes. He buried him alive with snakes, oh my gosh, that was so entertaining to the point where like his in-ring stuff. Do you remember the DDT over at Matt's house?
Sure.
When we were in 6th grade, Danny took one, and we were kids. You couldn't do that move to somebody because you couldn't do it right without really hurting somebody.
On like pure concrete too.
Linoleum concrete. Yeah. Oh, and you heard a thud.
It was like so someone dropped a bowling ball on like their marble floor.
But I mean, I watched a video where somebody wanted to do that move out on the concrete, and Jake's like, I don't know about that, dude, because like I don't know about it. And he did, and there was a thud, and Jake had to stay in character. I mean, the back of his mind, he might be thinking, oh crap, did I kill this man? But you can't act like that in the heart of the match. So
right.
Yeah, Jake was my 8th ahead of, a lot of the guys we picked ahead of him. As if I was growing up, like as a favorite, my first favorite wrestler. Do you remember your first favorite wrestler?
Honestly, it was probably Andre, just because he was so big and there's something so like scary about him.
Yeah,
like when he was doing the heel thing
on TV. I didn't get it as much. Like if I were live in living color, like Shawn Michaels is so much bigger than me. Like he came out with the famous quote, "In the land of the giants, I look like a small person, but I'm 270 pounds and I can bench press 400. Like I'm bigger than you." So not being able to see Andre and like his hand is probably 10 times the size of mine. It wasn't the same for me. My first favorite wrestler was just because of his colorful nature, and I liked his hair. It was Brutus Beefcake.
Beefcake was one of my favorites too. And you know who else, even though he wasn't.
Can you imagine Beefcake making this list though? Like in no way, shape, or form would, old Max pick him.
Yeah, same here, but he would have been top 5 for me. Like if you asked me when I was 12, my top 5, Andre probably wouldn't have been in my top 5 when I was 12. I would have felt like I'd outgrown that. Like I would have thought like, oh, that's babyish to be scared by the tall, scary guy. At 12, I probably would have said like, if tag teams were to count as one entry, I would have said Demolition.
So Demolition Smash is my number 2. I loved Smash. I got to meet them a couple years later after I met Ric Flair. They are still large men. Like I shook their hands and their hands are 3 times the size of mine. They're big dudes.
Why were they dressed like gimps, like in like bondage gear, like the gimp from Pulp Fiction?
So when I met them, when I met Ric Flair, I didn't mark out as much. But when I saw Demolition, like I immediately went back to like 10-year-old Max, and like I had a hard time asking them anything. I was the only person in line to meet. It was a Comic-Con down in Maryland, and I had a hard time getting. The one thing I wanted to know was like, what did you guys do before matches to get your tongue so red? Like, because I would eat Italian ice, like we'd eat the cherry ice, and like you look like Smash then.
Yeah.
I always wondered if they had like 10 popsicles before a match, but I couldn't get it out. I remember so Barry Darso, who is Smash, is a bald dude now, and I remember telling him, when I was growing up, I had the mullet just like you, and now I have the hair just like you.
You make it sound like he
laughed.
converted religions. He's a bald guy now. He's reformed.
Well, if you look at some of his work, like when he was the Repo Man, it was thinning more than mine is. Mine is definitely a choice. I think his was more of he looks better with it all gone than maybe some strands. One of the coolest voices in wrestling was Bill 80, the guy who played Axe. He had a great raspy, we're gonna stick our foot down your throat type thing. But yes, Smash he was my number 2 pick if I had to pick as a favorite. And then Undertaker, Stone Cold made the list. Later on in my life, I was really entertained by, I don't know if you're going to know the name Adam Rose. You'd have to watch some highlights of just how just weird he was on TV. He was, and he had his Rosebud, the weirdo characters that followed him like he was the Pied Piper. He entertained me. He was never even a mid-carder. He was below mid-card. Same thing with Enzo Amore. I don't know if you know that name.
That's a real guy.
Yeah. So Enzo Amore was like a Jersey Guido guy. And he had like Randy Savage hair, except it was all like straight. It was not. You watch some Enzo Amore highlights, you'd be entertained. But Santino Marella, comedy wrestler, so funny. Bray Wyatt, for the work he did supernaturally, he was like the new version of the Undertaker. If you see the Bray Wyatt John Cena Funhouse match at WrestleMania, it was less of a match than it was like a series of vignettes that resulted in like a 1-2-3 count. That was the most entertaining match I've ever seen, and it wasn't even a match. Check that out if you can.
Razor Ramon would have been on my top 5 list as a 12-year-old.
If we're doing vignettes, Razor's up there. With his the Scarface gimmick was really good, and I think it was A&E did one of their biographies on Scott Hall. His whole career and transformation from Scott Hall to Razor Ramon was really interesting in the way he took on those vignettes. Really entertaining stuff. I agree.
Have we spent too long talking about pro wrestling? Because I feel like we could do this another hour.
I don't know. I mean, now's a good time to get into our top 5. We can look back at before the draft, our top 5. So we're going to pick managers now, and managers you're going to see some overlap, I think, because you have to. I'll go backwards for mine. My number 5 just edged out Jim Cornette because this person, she knew how to draw heat from the fans, but she could also bump with the best of them. I'm going to pick sensational Queen Sherry as my number 5.
That's a strong pick. She didn't make my list, but you're right. Because I remember her being featured in some matches where it was, I can't remember who, it was a tag team match. Do you remember this at a WrestleMania? Or maybe
it was a mixed tag. Was she actually wrestling?
Yeah, it was a mixed tag.
So it's going to be Macho King and Sensational Queen Sherry against Dusty Rhodes and Sapphire.
That's right, Sapphire. Oh my God, she's not on
Sweet Sapphire. And then Sweet Sapphire turned on Dusty. It might have been that year. I don't know. Sapphire turned on Dusty because the $1 Million Man bought her stuff. And she didn't want to hang out with the plumber anymore.
A lot of loose morals in the wrestling world.
Absolutely.
My number 5, and you know all these are going to be retro. I'm going with the Slickster.
Slick!
It's tough to give someone the character of a 70s street pimp and have him make it a family friendly, but somehow the Slickster pulled it off.
I believe the 7 greatest words uttered in professional wrestling in the 1980s were
Turn out the
Turn out
lights.
the lights. The
The
party's,
party's
over.
over.
Yes, Slick's tremendous. My number 4, and most of these managers I think are heel managers because that's just the way it was. Who widely noted as one of the biggest pranksters behind the scenes. Like, you never wanted to get on this guy's bad side because he could prank with the best of them, and was one of the main reasons why his tag teams won with the Fuji Dust. I'm going to go with Mr. Fuji.
He's also my number 4, so we'll save time right there.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to save time on my number 3 because my number 3 was Slick.
Okay.
I rated Slick a little higher just because of the 7 greatest words in 1980s wrestling.
The Fuji Dust, by the way, is an all-timer of a bit. Like, just to be blowing whatever cocaine, like some mysterious white powder, anthrax. I don't know.
What could possibly hurt a 300-pound man to the point where he's going to lay on his back for 3 seconds? I don't know.
I remember when the man who portrayed Mr. Fuji passed away, and I joked to a friend. I said, his final wishes were to be cremated and then to be blown into Tito Santana's eyes.
Yeah, yes. I have nothing to add to that. That's tremendous.
My number 3, boy, just a real little runt, just a great guy who was I hesitate to call him a weasel because that person will be higher up on my list. But if you talk about a manager you just wanted to see get body slammed, it's Jimmy Mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart.
Or you see, he's get his hair cut at WrestleMania 4. Yeah, Jimmy Hart was he didn't make my list, but he could bump too. And that's what you need out of a heel manager, to take the heat for their guy. And yeah, Jimmy was so loud and shrill.
Just like the nonstop chatter. He was like a JV baseball third base coach. He was like, "Come on, baby, come on, tough for two."
That's a good comp right there. And later on in his career, like when he started managing Hogan, the outfit, he used to just have like the white jacket with the hearts all over it. Yeah. But then like the airbrushing of like he got very artistic with his stuff, and he was actually very musically inclined. I'm pretty sure he actually helped the Honky Tonk Man record some of the intro stuff for his, because he's actually singing rhythm and blues. Honky Tonk Man is, but I think Jimmy was very musically inclined. And A&E again does this show called Lost Treasure or something where they go try to find old wrestling artifacts. And the last one I watched on DVR, Jimmy Hart was looking for something, and the man still talks like that's his voice, that high shrill, like you said, weaselly almost. Yeah, good pick, man. Solid pick. Didn't make my top 5, but that's because like now we get to the top 2. Who's your number 2?
I can't have a top 5 without the first lady of 80s wrestling, the lovely Miss Elizabeth.
13-year-old Max would have agreed with you. Old Max looks at her the way Jesse Ventura looks at her. Yeah. But Jesse Ventura used to look at her as a liability. And, she wasn't going to interject in it. She was nice to look at, and she was the secret weapon in 88. Let's get that straight. But her lack of, I guess she didn't need to say anything because she was just like classily and daintily beautiful.
She really was like a lady in despair from like a silent film. Like they did everything but tie her to train tracks.
Yeah, that's 100%. But what's amazing is when she first broke in, when Randy Savage announced her as the manager, he was a heel. And he had all the heel managers in there. You had Fuji and Heenan and Freddie Blassie and the I think his name was the Grand Wizard. If it wasn't, and I say something offensive, I apologize. I think all the heel guys are like, who's he going to pick? And he pulls out this beautiful woman, and she never really played the role as heel manager. So it felt mismatched in a way at the beginning. She blended into the first lady so well. Like you said, damsel in distress, played it to perfection. And,
also just one of the funniest gimmicks when Macho Man proposed to her before SummerSlam in the middle of the ring, like, oh, how
Will
romantic.
you marry me?
And what other answer could there possibly be?
Oh yeah. She said, "Oh gosh,
So
that was
corny.
sweet." Even more corny though, and this was before I could do anything with Photoshop. What your number one draft pick did? Ric Flair took pictures of Randy Savage and photoshopped himself having Elizabeth feed him fruit at the swimming pool.
Yeah.
That was so incredible.
Compromised
And I think
incest.
so. Like Randy Savage was super protective and super jealous. Like nobody even he would put her in the locker room and lock the door, like because she was his real wife. You couldn't let her get within 20 feet of Ric Flair.
Did they ever do? I'm trying to remember, like an arc with like Rick Rude and Miss Elizabeth, because that's surprising given his
I
his
bet
whole
you
shtick.
Randy poo pooed that. I mean, what Rick Rude did with Jake Roberts and Cheryl Roberts and that, I think doing it again with Elizabeth would have been like, you're working a different gimmick. Uh, I wonder if it was the fact that at the time Rick Rude wasn't considered a top card guy. He really didn't hit that top card until after WrestleMania 6 when the Warrior had the heavyweight title and they had their cage match that SummerSlam. By that time, I think Randy Savage was at a point with Liz, like they were going to get kayfabe married, and that they never did anything with Rude though. And I don't know if it was a missed opportunity or if it just, if Savage just poo pooed and said, no, we're not going to do that.
Right.
It's a good question. I don't know. My number two, our number one guys are the same. That's pretty obvious. My number two guy was actually born on September 11th, 1965, just like you. Not 1965, but there you go. And he largely, this is based on the A&E biography I saw, because a lot of what I've seen him do recently is, talk for guys like Brock Lesnar who can't talk, or Roman Reigns before he could talk. But Paul Heyman is one of the greatest wrestling minds I've ever seen or come across. Back from his time, you know how he broke into wrestling? This is a great story. He was living in New York, and he made a fake press pass, and he went down to Madison Square Garden and got into the Garden to do photography for like the old wrestling magazines, like Pro Wrestling Illustrated and like the stuff you'd see at Murph's.
Right.
He worked as a freelance photographer to get behind the scenes, and he started networking that way until somebody called him and said, "Hey, do you want to be a manager?" And he, how did the name Paul E. Dangerously came about from either a movie or a TV show or something. And what I always thought a good heel manager needed, Jimmy Hart had the megaphone, Fuji had the dust, Jim Cornette had the tennis racket. You need something you could hit a bigger guy with and knock him out.
Fuji also had the cane.
The cane, that's right. That's how Demolition won in WrestleMania 4. Paul Heyman had the yuppie Zach Morris cell phone, which I thought was just a great gimmick, because you could configure it that you could smash it on somebody's head and it would bust into a million pieces, and it would look like you did a lot of physical damage, but you really didn't. So visually, it was a really good look, I think. I'm going to go Paul Heyman number one or number two.
And that's a great choice at two. I didn't include him just because I wasn't watching wrestling by the time he was doing his best stuff. So
yeah,
I'd be putting him on based solely on reputation and not my experience having, watched him.
Totally fair.
Obviously, our shared number one is the Brain.
Yeah, and I think that's why I said the top five, because I could live with you drafting Ric Flair because I'll get stone cold. I think anybody getting the top pick in managers and taking Bobby Heenan is so far head and shoulders above everybody else. And I wonder if it's just because of his managing, or if it's because of the work he did with Monsoon on Primetime Wrestling and like his color commentary.
Yeah, I mean, plus he was just he was almost like an improv comic, just coming up with funny stuff on the fly. There was certainly no one funnier in the booth. Jesse Ventura was pretty good. And
Jesse
Monsoon was
Ventura was a good heel announcer. He would rile up like Jesse. No, you're wrong. But I think Heenan would be the heel announcer, but make you laugh at the same time because he would like be very childish and name call. Although Jesse did come up with Chico Santana, which
and also Heenan and Gorilla Monsoon, like. Monsoon was just like the long-suffering straight man who had to, put up with like all the stupid stuff Heenan would say, and Gorilla would be like, "Oh, give me a break." Like they just had such a great dynamic.
Like the vignettes they did on the boardwalk at Atlantic City pre WrestleMania 4 and WrestleMania 5. Yeah. The work on primetime wrestling in the studio before they send you off to a jobber match. That's unparalleled. You're never going to see that again. And when Gorilla Monsoon died, Bobby Heenan was hurt to the point where the other organization stopped their show and acknowledged the fact that Gorilla had died. And Bobby had a hard time the rest of that show because they were really close. And you could tell because they worked so well together.
And what I've read about Bobby Heenan, he was just a really good guy, like off camera, like just universally beloved.
And like any good heel manager he could bump, he took a press slam from the Ultimate Warrior. He was attacked by that Mutt Matilda. And if you go back and watch, this is funny. The WrestleMania 4, he comes out in the dog catcher gear. Oh, he could rile people up. But the British Bulldogs had to they were putting the dog physically on him because I don't think Matilda wanted to bite him. She was like, "I like this guy."
And you talk about coining words. I mean, what about calling fans humanoids?
Humanoids, ham and egger.
Ham and egger. Just great, unique insults.
And like you said, improv comic at his best. So I don't think anybody who watched wrestling in the 80s or acknowledged any kind of history would come up with somebody different. We had some differences on our list, which is good. You'll have that to a point. The other thing that we do, the goofy segment, and I don't know if he's watching right now, but believe it or not, we have a question from you from a viewer. So Mr. Smarty Pants, Mr. Smarty Pants, one of our viewers, Jake from Pennsylvania, said, and I had to look this up. I have no faith in you getting the question.
Okay.
But then I have the list for you. I think you're going to do better on the list. Okay. So our question from Jake, I'm going to read this straight from him. Who was the first NFL player to kick a field goal over 55 yards? And I had to look it up myself. So people watching at home, he hasn't heard this question. He had no chance to think about this. This is straight up live. Who is the first NFL player to kick a field goal over 55 yards?
All right, so I doubt it's Tommy Dempsey because his 60.
It's not Tommy Dempsey,
right? But it's got to be before Tommy Dempsey because he hit the 63-yarder.
So this one, I will tell you the length is 56 yards.
All right, so it's got to be a recognizable name. What about Pat Summerall?
It was not Pat Summerall.
What about Lou Graza?
It was not Lou Groza or Graza, however you say it. Wasn't him.
So then,
these are good guesses.
Jan Stenrud's probably too late because that's after Dempsey hit the 63, I think. It's not Jan Stenrud, is it?
Not Jan Stenrud. This is a name I hadn't heard of. It's like all the names you threw out at me, I've heard of.
All right, so that
which is why when I looked this up, I'm like, what kind of question is this? Jake is goofy.
That rules out Gary Premian.
Yeah, he's not.
I'm trying to think of other kickers of that era.
I'll give you a clue if you want.
Okay.
The player in question played for the 1953 Colts.
Art Donovan?
It's not Art Donovan.
I thought for some... for some reason, I thought he was like a lineman kicker for a short time.
He very well may have been, but he did not kick the 56-yard field goal in question.
56 yards for the
game was played on September 27th, 1953. The Chicago Bears were at the Baltimore Colts.
I don't think I know it.
I didn't either. So is the official, like, waving the white flag, Jake, you win. And for stumping Mr. Smarty Pants, we'll send you something.
Meatball.
I don't know.
Cash on delivery.
We owe you a meatball. So the answer is Bert Reschishar. Are you familiar with the name Bert Reschishar?
I'm not.
So Bert Reschishar is the answer.
Now, I wouldn't know him.
Now, so as time ran out in the first half of the season, this is straight from the interwebs. As time ran out of the first half of the season opener for the 53 Colts, Buck McPhail lined up for what would have been a miraculous record-setting 56-yard field goal, but Colts assistant coach Otis Douglas remembered the powerful leg that Reschishar had shown in practice, hastily pulled McPhail from the game. Reschishar rushed into the game wearing a regular soft-toed football shoe rather than the square-toed kicking shoe, and delivered a low-line drive that not only cleared the crossbar at the goal line, but also sailed out of the end zone. The home crowd erupted. Now, question number 2, based on what I researched, this is not the list.
Yeah.
Question number 2 that I thought was interesting, the aforementioned Colts game against Chicago, the Bears had opened up the scoring with a 23-yard rushing touchdown, so they're up 7-0. The Reschishar kick gave the Colts a 10-7 lead at the half. So, who for the Colts scored to tie the game?
Raymond Berry.
It was not Raymond Berry.
Alan Amici.
Not Alan Amici. This it's a ridiculous question because the answer is Bert Reschishar had a 36-yard interception return.
Wow, big day for Bert.
So I looked up the answer. I'm looking up the answer to this question. I'm like, wow, that is some interesting trivia. Not only did he hit the 56-yarder, but he got an interception return to tie the game earlier on.
He's got to be the only player in NFL history with a pick six and a
field goal
in the same
Probably. I mean, Chad Johnson / Ochocinco could have had a reception, and I think he kicked an extra point once, or at least he asked to.
Yeah,
you're not going to see a DB kicking. So yeah, I'm pretty confident that you're right there. If you at home or wherever you are have a question for Mr. Smarty Pants, you'd like to see him answer it live without practice, send us an email. Our email is down there at the bottom. Reach out on Facebook. We're working on Instagram. We're not that cool yet, but Jake won. Mr. Smarty Pants nothing, and now I got to get my sheet of paper here because I went low-fi for you. I saw a video online, and I thought, well, this is good. I bet you Tim would do better with this, certainly than he did with kickers from the 1950s. We're going to go back to the 1920s, but then work our way through the 2010s. Going back to the 20s and running through each decade, which Major League Baseball player has the most home runs in each decade? And I give you bonus points if you can get within 30 home runs plus or minus the actual total that they had.
So full disclosure, I've not on this podcast, but I've been asked this trivia question before.
Oh, really? Okay, then you should do really well.
Yeah, I believe it's Ruth for the 20s.
So Ruth is not. So do you know how many home runs he hit? Plus or minus 30. Just in the 20s now. That part might be difficult. Okay.
I'll say 530.
530 puts you too far over. It was 467.
Okay.
So you got Ruth in the 20s. How about the 30s?
I believe that was Jimmy Fox.
Jimmy Fox is correct. How many did he hit in the 30s?
410.
Dude, you were there, man. 415.
Because I knew he hit 534 for his career, but he did, a bit in the 20s. So, okay, I'm good
Bulk
with that.
of the damage in the 30s there. 1940s, you should get this.
40s, if I remember right, was Stan Musial.
Not Stan Musial.
It's not Ted Williams because he missed too much time in the military.
It is Ted Williams.
Really?
According to this guy's list, I didn't fact check it. So,
I thought I
how many home
remembered
runs
being Musial, even though he only had 475.
I could look it up now, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to pretend that video's right.
Okay.
How many home runs did Williams hit in the 40s, according to these people?
Okay, let me think. Williams comes up in 39, so he plays 40, 41. He misses 42, 43. So he only has 7 years, and we'll say he hits 30. Let's say 310.
No, way too many.
I was going to only say like 270, but
270 would have got you closer, but he only hit 234.
okay. Yeah, that makes sense with World War II.
According to these people, I should have done the research, but I wasn't going to. 1950s. I know Jake knows the answer to this.
Is it Mantle?
It's not Mantle.
Because I was going to say Aaron.
It's not Aaron either.
Mays?
It's not Mays. It's the other guy. So, outfielder, Brooklyn.
Oh, that's right. It is Duke Snider.
Duke Snider. And how many home runs did Snider hit in the 50s?
Oh, let's give him, I'll say 300.
Yeah, that's a winner. It's within 30. 326.
Okay. I was trying to think like 30 a year.
There you go. All right, 1960s.
Aaron?
That is not correct.
Frank Robinson?
Again, according to these guys. Nope.
Harmon Killebrew?
It is Harmon Killebrew. I was going to say, if I told you he played in Minnesota, that would totally give it away. Now, Harmon Killebrew. And how many? Give me a number.
I'll say 320 again. Like around 320.
320 is a little low. The actual number is 393.
Okay. I was trying to remember how far into the 70s he might have played. 70s, I'll say Willie Stargell.
It is Willie Stargell. You are correct. Give me a number.
He finished with 478, but he played a good amount in the 60s. I'll say 320.
320 is a win for you. 296. So you got within 30. 1980s.
Schmidt.
Mike Schmidt. That is correct. Number?
All right. So he finished with 548. He came up in 74. Played till 89, but barely. I'll say 295.
295 is a win for you. 313. So you got within 30. 1990s.
McGuire?
Mark McGuire is a winner. How many did he hit in the 90s?
Because he had some years where he was hurt and he barely played, and then he went to St. Louis and he was launching 60 a year. 410.
410. That's a winner. 404. Nice. 2000s.
I forget 2000s. It's someone not obscure, but not someone who you'd immediately think.
2000 to 2009. It's not obscure.
Not obscure, but not the first person you'd think of.
Might be the second person you think of.
Pujols?
Who would have been the first person I thought of? He's not correct.
It can't be Bonds. He played till like 07.
Not Bonds.
It's not Ryan Howard because he didn't play early enough in the decade.
Nope. And again, I didn't fact check this. This is the Facebook video I watched.
Right. I'm just trying to think now. I'm going through the teams.
When you hear the name, you'll be like, oh gosh, yeah. This might be worse than Glenn Steele.
Who is it? I'm curious now.
Alex Rodriguez.
Oh, of course it is. I should
How
have
many
just
home
gone
runs
down.
did it?
Okay.
How many did he hit in the 2000s?
He came up for 97. He had 696. I'm gonna say. I'll say 410.
410. Hey, there's redemption for you. 435.
All right.
So you were within the 30 home run range or whatever. Now the 2010s. That's I had no clue on this because I'm watching the video along with him. I'm like, I did pretty well. This would be a big one for you if you get it.
I'll take a hint.
Oh, you want a hint?
I do.
I will tell you that over the course of his career, he played in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He played in 8 different cities. So he's well traveled.
Yeah.
The bulk of his power came in the American League West. I would say almost 2/3 of his career power came in the American League West.
How about Adrian Beltre?
Beltre is a great guess, and that's what this guy guessed. Adrian Beltre is not right, though.
8 cities, AL West.
Finished his career nondescriptly in San Diego.
Nondescriptly in San Diego.
Where he hit 5 of his total home runs in 49 games.
Oof.
So a lot of injuries post 2020. He had stints before San Diego with the Nationals and with the Rays, but I would have never thought of him as a National or a Ray. Although the year in Washington, it was a year after they won.
Soriano?
Soriano, yeah, and he was with the Nationals.
I was trying to think of guys who jumped around a little. I don't
And
know.
he spent some time in the American League West. They called him Boomstick. Does that help?
I'm terrible with modern player nicknames.
I just looked it up myself because I didn't know if he had a nickname.
I stopped caring about most pro nicknames when players started giving themselves nicknames. It felt like shoe branding, and I was like, oh, well, this doesn't interest me at all.
He hit for his career. He has 464 home runs, 157 of them in Texas, 163 in Seattle. He was an all-star. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. Most of the time with his days in Seattle. He was up for the MVP. Finished 6th back in 2015.
This is the one that I was thinking of for the 2000s, where it was someone you wouldn't.
It was going to be the obscure name,
right? But it escapes me. I know exactly. Like I can. He was a teammate of Josh Hamilton's in Texas. I just can't think of his name. Like he was on those Ron Washington teams.
Nelson Cruz.
Nelson Cruz. I shouldn't have said I even got it before because I'm at the age now where I just forget this stuff anyway.
Yeah, well, I thought you might have seen the same video I saw, and this name would have stuck out because, well, the guy doing the video, you did so much better than this. Like this is supposed to be a baseball podcast, and this guy was. I should almost try to find it and send it to you. Like he did very poorly. You, on the other hand, did remarkably well for, again, doing this live without any kind of practice. The concept of picking guys from decades. I thought, you'll do well, and you have redeemed yourself from trying to name 246 Red Sox and
Red
Yankees.
Sox
So
Yankees. Yeah,
that's good. If you have a question for him, either put it in the YouTube chat. I'll see it, or put it in Facebook. Stump Mr. Smarty Pants as best as you can. Before we call it a day, I got to tell you, like when we put these rundowns together, at the end of a newscast, they have this thing called a kicker, which is like some kind of fun story. I was at work last week looking at old bookmarks on Chrome, and apparently I had one that was like on this day in baseball. On August 22nd, I got to share this with you because this is ridiculous. 1886, Louisville's Chicken Wolf, baseball name, period. Chicken Wolf hits a game-winning inside the park home run thanks to a stray dog impeding Abner Powell from fielding the ball. The canine, who had been sleeping by the fence, refused to let go of the pants leg of the red center fielder as Chicken Wolf rounded the bases in a 5-4 loss at Eclipse Park. So,
rather than putting in like innings pitched minimums or shift rules, I really think the commissioner needs to address the stray dog problem in professional baseball.
The Yankees had a squirrel one year climbing the pole. Or what was in LA, the Homer chipmunk or the Homer
the
squirrel?
rally monkey.
Rally monkey. There you go. That wasn't a real monkey though.
Well, they have a monkey they show on the screen though, because I've been to a couple Angels games in Anaheim. They still do the rally monkey.
You could buy the stuffed rally monkey. But there was an actual live squirrel that climbed the left field foul pole at Yankee Stadium. He was like standing there, and the camera guy got him on camera, and that became. I love what baseball teams use as like their rallying cries from year to year. Like it always changes. I think it's kind of neat. Like the one year, there was a Yankees Mets game, and there was this Mets fan who got his picture taken, and then all the Yankees they turned that into their rallying cry. Like Nick Swisher would hit a double, and he'd be like, "Yeah."
I think it's amazing that the concept is so fluid that one time the Yankees could be like, "We dedicate this season to 9/11 having rocked our nation," and then another year they can be like, "Hey, that squirrel's funny."
Exactly. If you can't get behind that, then I don't know what to tell you.
How can you help but be romantic about baseball?
That's where we are. So, Chicken Wolf, thank you for our outro. So, Tim, it's about that time. Go get your strudel. A pleasant talking today, and
I believe it's bagel o'clock.
It's bagel o'clock, and I'm gonna go see if I can find another meatball laying around here. But we'll be back. Hopefully, we'll try to work on getting a guest this week, another media guest, because next week something's starting next week, football, and the kids are interested in that. So, looking forward to NFL predictions next week or this week, depending on what day we do this, Saturday or Sunday.
Absolutely. I love talking football.
Tim, have a great rest of your day, and the rest of you people out there, don't let the meatballs get soggy and don't let the soup get cold. We'll see you next time.